Well, thanks very much, Jay. It's a real pleasure to be here, and thanks for organising this. Thanks, Jane, for doing it as well, and thanks everybody for being here and caring about your state and caring about the country. Now, can everybody hear me down the back? Okay. Can you understand the southern accent all right? I worry about that. Okay. I want to start. I'm a New Zealander. I live in Florida right now. People ask me all the time why, as a New Zealander, I should care about the United States. And I say there are two reasons. The first is gratitude. You know, my country was facing invasion during World War II from the Japanese army. And if it hadn't been for the sacrifice of your fathers and uncles and grandfathers at the battles of Guadalcanal and the Coral Sea and Midway, we would have been done, folks. That's my mum and dad you're talking about. So that's very personal to me. Second reason is related, it's a little more selfish. Ronald Reagan had it right. This is the last best hope for mankind. Yes, it is. Last best hope. There's nowhere left to run, folks, if this country goes down. You know, right now this country is facing major attacks on its constitution, its liberty, its economic dynamism, and even its military superiority. And if this is allowed to continue, we'll soon be living in a world run out of Moscow and Beijing and Tehran and Havana. And is that the kind of world anybody wants to leave to their kids, folks? So if we care about freedom, we have to care about America. Everybody does. Now, I live in a very free state, Florida. I'm there for my family lives there, my wife's family. It's great. I'm there for the fishing, the family, and the freedom, right? Now, we got a great governor. I want to talk, because I want to, at the end of this, when I offer a few solutions, I'll probably invoke Ron DeSantis a little bit. You've all heard of Ron DeSantis? Oh, yeah. Okay. See, we love Ron DeSantis like a chocolate, okay? Even the Democrats do. But before I talk about Ron later on, I have to reveal my relationship. You know, in the interest of transparency, I have to tell you about my relationship with Ron, you see. Because my wife's family, Ron's family comes from Philadelphia. My wife's family comes from Philadelphia. And 40 years ago, my wife's aunt dated Ron DeSantis' father's cousin. Okay? So we're practically family, all right? So just so you know, all right? Yeah, exactly. Just so you know where I'm coming from. Now, Connecticut. Why is Connecticut important? Well, you know, you're right next to New York. You're a big financial center here. You're influential. You've got a lot of submarine bases here. You've got a lot of military technology here. The communists targeted this state very early on because there's money here, there's military here, and they had a big bleed out from New York. The Communist Party's headquarters was New York, and Connecticut was the place they bled out into and basically took over the state. So what do I mean by taking over the state? You know, that's just a little bit of an extreme statement, right? Well, it means that most of the legislation that comes into your state, most of the policies that you live by, most of the direction this state goes in is dictated by the Communist Party. The Communist Party USA, which everybody thinks long gone or is a vestige of history or died out in the 1950s, is now running one of the most politically important states in the country. Now, I want to talk about the significance of that. So what? You got communists running your state. Big deal. So what? How do they get the power they do? Because we're probably talking less than 1,000 people here. But, you know, how many mafia does it take to control a town? How many mafia did it take to run Las Vegas? You know, they work in the same way, undercover. They have secret members. They have lawyers on their payroll. They corrupt politicians. They do all these things. They control labor unions. They work very similar to the mafia. And, you know, we say the mafia, a lot of people say the mafia runs Rhode Island, for instance. Well, yeah, they probably do. Well, the Communist Party runs this state in a very similar fashion. So how do they work? See, back in the 1980s, New Zealand had a very strong military alliance with the United States. The Australia, New Zealand, United States military alliance, ANZUS. In 1984, we elected a socialist Labour government. And the first thing they did was to ban nuclear warships from our harbours. And that killed our alliance with the United States. And it's still dead today. Because if you couldn't send your ships into our harbours, there was no point in having a military alliance. Well, this is how it happened, and I'll go into more how it happens here. See, New Zealanders were very pro-American. As I said, we were saved by America. But the communists controlled the Labour Party in New Zealand. And at that time, there was a big battle going on between the Soviet Union and the United States, and it was centred on Europe. And NATO was the mainstay of that. You know, NATO had been set up after the Soviets had invaded most of Eastern Europe and had threatened to conquer the whole of Europe. So the remaining free states got together and set up a military alliance. Very sensible move. But that was stalling the Soviets, because the Soviets wanted to take all of Europe as part of their goal of world domination. And so they had massive anti-nuclear rallies in Paris and London and Rome and Berlin, you know. America out of Europe, disband NATO, ban the bomb. And they had hundreds of thousands of people marching through Europe. The whole goal was to break up NATO so that the Soviet Union could conquer the whole of Europe. They had actually plans to do it. They had planned to invade Europe once in 1979, which they called off at the last moment, and again in 1983, called off at the last moment. And so they had this going on, but Reagan and Thatcher and the Pope were the big flies in the ointment at that time. They were tough, they were strong, they weren't going to put up with any of the Soviet garbage. So the Soviets are chess players, and they thought, well, if we can't disband NATO, let's work on some of the other American alliances, because that will provide a moral, you know, that will be a propaganda win for us, and we can use, say, taking New Zealand out of ANZUS, that will spur on the anti-NATO movement in Europe. So they went to New Zealand. And I interviewed this guy. His name was John van der Ven. He was a Dutch New Zealander who infiltrated the New Zealand Communist Party, the Socialist Unity Party, for our security services. He was an undercover government agent inside the Communist Party. In 1983, he was sent to train as a communist with 3 genuine communists to Lenin's Institute for Higher Learning on Leningradsky Prospect, Moscow. 3,500 students at any one time from virtually every country in the world. They were taught trade union agitation. They were taught racial agitation. Some of them were taught sabotage. They were taught Russian history. These were the vanguard of the coming world communist revolution. And while they were there, these 4 New Zealand delegates had meetings with the Soviet staff dedicated to New Zealand. They had 16 people focusing on New Zealand alone. Many of them had lived in New Zealand undercover, posing as ordinary Kiwis. They had, they had sociologists, historians. They knew everything about New Zealand, the religious history, the political history, the racial dynamics, the religious dynamics. They knew New Zealand better than any New Zealander would ever hope to. And so their goal was, how do we get this pro-American country out of the military alliance with the United States? So they knew they couldn't run an anti-American campaign. They couldn't do that. But they could prey on New Zealanders' patriotism, New Zealanders' sense of nationalist pride, and they could prey on the fear of nuclear war that the communists had been promoting for years. You know, some of you kids may remember ducking when you were kids, ducking under your desks, you know, practicing nuclear arms drills. Well, they were promoting this stuff like crazy. Nuclear winter, all this kind of horror stuff. And so what they did, they mounted a campaign. They came up with some slogans. New Zealanders standing against the nuclear arms race. New Zealanders standing up for peace. New Zealanders standing against the military-industrial complex. And they came back to New Zealand, these 4 delegates. They had secret meetings with the peace movement, which they controlled, with the Labour movement, which they also controlled, and the Labour Party, which they had heavily infiltrated, the equivalent of your Democratic Party. And they drew up this campaign: we're going to have a nuclear-free New Zealand. We're going to ban nuclear warships, nuclear power, nuclear everything from New Zealand. And they mounted a big campaign. Within the 6 months, they had that law passed through the New Zealand legislature. And our military alliance with your country was dead. And New Zealanders were so proud that we had stood up against the military-industrial complex, the nuclear scenario. We were so proud. We'd done it. We were Kiwis, and we're on the world stage leading the way. And I'll tell you today, 5 million New Zealanders, and probably less than 1% of them, have any idea that was completely planned from the Soviet Union. 100%. Completely sucked the whole country in. So if they could do it in New Zealand, why couldn't they do it in Connecticut? Now, a couple of examples from America. See, this is how it works. The communists, the Chinese, the Russians, whatever, they still do this. They set a plan. This is what we want: a nuclear deal with Iran for America. We want fracking bans in America. We want socialized healthcare in America. We want open borders in America. They set a policy that is given to the American communists, who then make it labor union policy, and the labor unions make it Democrat policy. When Obama was in power, the Communist Party was running America, as it is under Biden right now. Because all of the policies that come out of the Democratic Party come out of the communist movement. It's a process of osmosis. The communists set a policy, they make it labor union policy because they control all the labor unions, and the Democrats can't get elected without the labor unions, so they adopt the labor unions' policies and they make them Democrat policy. So all of the major policies coming out of today's Democratic Party come from the communist movement, 100%. Same with the Canadian Liberal Party, the British Labour Party, the French Socialist Party, the German Social Democratic Party, which is now in control in Germany, led by Olaf Scholz, who used to go to East Germany for meetings with Egon Krenz back in the 80s when he was the leader of the German Socialist Youth. So they basically, when the Democrats are in power, the communists are in power. You think about, Obamacare. So what they did with Obamacare, this was a communist policy, mainly coming through Democratic Socialists of America. And you've got 2 major communist parties in this state: Communist Party USA and Democratic Socialists of America. So in 1994, Democratic Socialists of America made single-payer socialised healthcare their #1 priority. They used people like John Conyers of Michigan to start running single-payer bills. They set up physicians for a national health program to get doctors on board. They started bringing Canadian doctors down here and talking all about socialised healthcare and how wonderful it was. So that was the grassroots. That was the grassroots stuff. Then they started using John Conyers and others to start bringing state bills and federal bills pushing socialised healthcare. They knew they would fail, but they knew if they kept doing it, they'd get a few more people on board every election cycle. But their big coup was when they got Barack Obama pushing socialised healthcare. See, the father of the socialised healthcare movement in this country was a man called Quentin Young of Chicago, a physician from Cook County Hospital. He'd been in the Communist Party, then he joined Democratic Socialists of America. He was Barack Obama's personal physician. His family, Barack Obama's family were Quentin Young's customers. Quentin Young takes open credit for indoctrinating Obama into the ideas of socialised healthcare. He boasts about this publicly in several forums. I have him on video saying this. So they had a man at the top, and they had people in Congress, mainly through the Congressional Progressive Caucus, which they control, and they had the grassroots. And so when the Democrats got in power in 2008, it was on the national agenda as Democratic policy. But it was completely driven by Democratic Socialists of America and the Communist Party USA. 100% their operation. Think about this, folks. If they can bring in socialised healthcare, they have you. If they control your health and your body, they also control your mind and your politics, because you are not going to oppose the government that controls your health care, the government that decides whether your 7-year-old daughter gets treatment for her leukemia or doesn't. It decides whether your 75-year-old grandfather is going to get treatment for his prostate cancer or doesn't, or what level of treatment he gets. Socialised healthcare is the way to control the population. And it's completely 100% driven by the communist movement in this country. But how many Americans do you think understand that? Not many. Oh, it's free. It's free healthcare. Wow, I don't have to pay all these co-pays anymore. Blah, blah, blah. It's very attractive. Illegal immigration. Okay, that's just a lot of people wanting to come across the southern border, right? The first pioneer of the illegal immigration movement in this country as an organised political force was Bert Corona of California, Los Angeles. He was a big activist in the 50s and the 60s, active in the labour movements in Los Angeles, a Communist Party member, but also a Democrat. He set up the Viva Kennedy clubs to support Bobby Kennedy when he was running for president. Very close to the Kennedy family. But he was a Communist Party member. He set up CASA and La Hermandad, several organisations that were devoted to helping illegals come across the border, to get them settled in factories and farms, get them eventual citizenship and voting. Now, he trained a whole bunch of disciples to carry on his work. He set up a network right across all the southern states. He had Lorenzo Torres, the head of the Communist Party in Arizona. He had Cesar Chavez on board with him. He had Dolores Huerta, who got the Presidential Medal of Freedom from Obama, Democratic Socialists of America member. He had all these people across the southern states working on this. He set up a whole network in Los Angeles. He had a few people. He had Gil Cedillo, who was the head of the California State Senate, who granted driver's license to illegal immigrants in the state. He had Maria Elena Durazzo, the head of the California AFL-CIO, one of the biggest promoters of illegal immigration in the state. We also had Antonio Villaraigosa, who was mayor of Los Angeles for several years, who basically turned Los Angeles into a full-on sanctuary city, all to bring and attract thousands of illegal immigrants into the state, which they could then sign up legally or illegally for the Democratic Party to flip California from a conservative state to a Democrat state, which they have done, all on the back of illegal immigration. So Bert Corona had several other disciples. One of them was a man called Eliseo Medina, who used to work for Cesar Chavez. Eliseo Medina is the acknowledged leader of the illegal immigration movement in this country. He was on Obama's Latino Advisory Board. He was number 2 in the SEIU union. And he went all over the country just promoting amnesty for illegal immigration. The big problem was, in the 90s, the American labor unions, as an exception to most of the Western world, were not run by communists at that point. You had Lane Kirkland and George Meany, who were patriotic Americans who actually kept the communists out of the labor unions. It was illegal under their charter to be a communist and hold office in the AFL-CIO at the time. So that was the big problem. That was the bridge they needed, the unions, to bring this movement into the Democratic Party. And because at that stage the Democrats were very tied to the unions, as they always have been, they were anti-illegal immigration because the unions were anti-illegal immigration because they saw that illegal immigrants would take their members' jobs and break their strikes. And so you should see the speeches made by Bill Clinton and Harry Reid back in the 90s condemning illegal immigration as a national security disaster. It was a terrible thing. We had to start deporting these people. It was horrible. And the Republicans were allowing it. And partly that's true because the Republicans were in bed with the Chamber of Commerce, which wanted lots of cheap labour to run their factories and farms and didn't care about the consequences. But in 1994, there was a coup. That's the year that Democratic Socialists of America and Communist Party USA took over the AFL-CIO. And they put John Sweeney, their man, as president. He took out the clause in the AFL-CIO's constitution banning communists, and the communists came flooding in. They took over virtually every major labour union in the country at state and federal level. So the bridge was built. So they had the bridge now. So they could start, they flipped in 2000, they flipped the AFL-CIO from an anti-illegal immigrant position to a pro-illegal immigrant position. And they flipped the Democrats into a pro-illegal immigrant position. Eliseo Medina spoke in 2009, I have him on tape saying this at a big left-wing convention in Washington, D.C., and he said, illegal immigration is our number one priority for the, amnesty for illegals is the number one priority for the progressive movement. He talked about in 2008, 2 out of 3 Hispanics voted for Barack Obama. If we can legalize 8, 10, 12 million illegals, that'll be an extra 8 million voters for the Democrats. This will give us a governing majority, not just for the next few elections, basically forever. Well, it's actually more like 30 million illegals in the country, folks. Their plan is to basically Hillary Clinton promised to legalize every single illegal immigrant in the country within 100 days of taking office. That would have given the Democrats 15 or 16 million new voters overnight. And as most presidential elections are won or lost by less than 5 million votes, what do you think that would do to this country? Eliseo Medina was Obama's unofficial advisor on all issues of immigration. This Marxist advised Obama in his amnesty plans and in his open borders plans. This is the roots of what we're seeing right now on the southern border. They don't intend to bring 1 million across a year, folks. They want 5, 6, 7 million across in a year. They're doing it right now. See, and this is the other little thing we don't know. The pro-Chinese Communist Liberation Road, who are not really active in this state, but they gave you Black Lives Matter. That's their front. Black Lives Matter is a communist Chinese front. So they are working with the Mexican communists who control Morena. That is the political party now in power in Mexico. And AMLO, the leader of Mexico, Mr. Obrador, is a former member of the Mexican Communist Party and is part of the Sao Paulo Forum that was set up by Fidel Castro to restore for communism in Latin America what had been lost in Eastern Europe. And this is their plan. They're following the Venezuela model. Venezuela was the richest country in Latin America, right? 30 million people. Few years of socialism, 20% of the population left the country. Many of them are still in refugee camps. Some of them are here. They lost 20% of their population. Well, Mexico has 130 million people, folks. And AMLO is now taking the country down the Venezuela road. He is going full-on socialist in Mexico. He knows it's going to crash the Mexican economy, but that's the plan, because they are working with the American communists to keep the borders wide open so they can flood 20% of Mexico into the United States. And I did math before Common Core, folks, so I know that 26% of 130 million people is a lot. 20% is, I think, 26 million people. So we're in a revolution, folks. We're in a revolution right now, and they're in the final stages, and if we don't do something, we're going to lose it. We're going to be run by China, and we're going to be run by horrible foreign dictators forever. So, Connecticut, you look at your state, you got your high minimum wages, you got taxes up the wazoo, you've got affirmative action, you've got all of these left-wing programs in every area, at county, state and federal level. At every area, right? Because the communists control this state at every level. Now there's two communist parties, as I said, Communist Party USA and Democratic Socialists of America. Communist Party USA is based in New Haven at the People's Center at 37 Howe Street. And I thank Joe because he highlighted a few years ago when your governor at the time wanted to give $300,000 to that organisation to upgrade their building. And Joe got that stopped with no help from the Republicans. Now, there's probably about 500 to 600 members in the Communist Party in this state. I would say they're very strong in New Haven. They control they control a New Haven City Council completely, and they get a lot of money still from the New Haven City Council. It subsidises several of their projects. So the local taxpayers subsidise the Communist Party in New Haven. They're also very strong in Hartford, and they've got little pockets through the rest of the state. But if you control New Haven and you control Hartford, and you're very strong at Yale, you pretty much control the power centres of this state. So that's what they've done there. The head of the Communist Party in this state is Joelle Fishman. She's been here for 50 years working in your politics. She knows every one of your politicians. They all know her. They know who she is. Her late husband, he died last year, was Art Perlow. His father was Victor Perlow, who was one of the Silver Master spy ring, the Soviet spy ring in Washington, D.C. in the 1940s. They were working for Stalin in the government. Right now, the Communist Party USA is completely loyal to China, but they are still loyal to the Communist Party of Russia too, and they're still loyal to Putin's government, still today. In 2015, Alfred Marder, who is now 103 years old, has been a Communist Party member since 1952 in this state, very active in the New Haven Peace Council, which is part of the US Peace Council, which is part of the World Peace Council, a still existing Soviet entity, went to Moscow to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the victory over fascism. And he got up on stage in front of all these communists in Moscow, and he got a great big hug from Gennady Zyuganov, the head of the Russian Communist Party, right in front of everybody in downtown Moscow. They are deeply in bed with the Communist Party of China, the Communist Party of Russia, the Cubans, the Venezuelans, the Iraqi Communist Party, the British Communist Party. The World Communist Party now is stronger than it has been since the collapse of the Soviet Union. Way, way stronger. But we don't hear about it because you're not allowed to talk about these people. They're a secret society and you mustn't mention their name. They have a law of omerta. Where's my water? So, in 2012, I think it was Al Marder had his 100th, no, I think it was his 95th birthday or something, and they held a big celebration for him in this state. And they got a whole bunch of people to serve on the host committee for this big communist event. And you had Tony Harp there, who was the mayor of New Haven for many, many years, completely in bed with the Communist Party. She was there. Martin Looney, who was a top member of your state senate, was there for a long time. You had Tony Harp, I think, was a state senator at the time. Juan Candelaria, Patricia Dillon, Pat Dillon, she was there. Tony Walker, also very, very prominent in this state. Gary Winfield, very prominent in your state legislature. Roland Lamar, another prominent state legislator. They have got dozens of their friends in your state legislature and your state senate. So they've got the New Haven City Council under their control. They've got a big influence in Hartford, and they've got your state legislature deeply under their control. Arsenowicz, who was your previous Speaker of the House, very much involved with the Communist Party, very much involved with them.
He ran the labour union.
Yeah, well, he was. You see, they control every major labour union in the state. They control the Working Families Party. They control the New Haven Peace Council. They control Connecticutans opposed to war, and their big front is the Connecticut Alliance for Retired Americans. That's run by Joel Fishman, Winheimer, and other Communist Party members in the state. It's affiliated to the AFL-CIO, and every one of your congressmen and senators kisses their ring. Every single one of them. Your previous governor, Malloy, was very heavily involved in Communist Party fronts. He was involved with CTRA, the Connecticut Alliance for Retired Americans, very much part of it. Your current governor, he marches with Connecticut Communist Party members like Scott Marks. You see him photographed with Winheimer. They have no problem collaborating with the communists in the state. His father is Corliss Lamont, very, very active in New York. He was very active in Democratic Party politics, went to the Soviet Union a couple of times. Everybody was always accusing of him being a communist because he was involved in the American Soviet Friendship Society, but he always denied his Communist Party membership. But he was identified under oath on more than one occasion in the US Congress as being a full-fledged Communist Party member. So Ned Lamont is completely in bed with the communists in this state. His family has been for a very, very long time. And you'll find most of your senior legislators are as well. But what about Richard Blumenthal? Okay? Remember, he got caught, and I thank the people who exposed this man when he went to the Amistad ceremony last year. That's the annual communist awards giving ceremony in the state. And if you go to my website, KeyWiki, and you look up Connecticut Communist Party, I've got lists of people who've attended those for the last 10 or 15 years. And you will see numerous senior union officials, state reps, New Haven city councillors, all going to this annual, regular, this awards dinner for the communists. They have it, openly, and they give awards to the best, newspaper seller, and they give awards to union people who stand up and state reps. This is public knowledge, but nobody follows it until now. So Mr. Blumenthal turns up and he speaks to the crowd. And when I was exposed, he says, I didn't know it was a Communist Party event. Everybody on the left in this state knows that's a Communist Party event. Everybody. It is well known. It's not a secret. But Blumenthal has been very active with with CTRA, the Connecticut Association for Retired Americans. When the communists were doing strikes at Yale about 10 years ago, he was right in there supporting them, folks. He has been actively involved with the Communist Party for at least a decade. At least. And he has the gall to turn up at one of their events and say, I didn't know. And who called him out for it? Did the Hartford Courant call him out for this? They all covered for him. You know, should be like, you know, imagine a Republican Party guy keynoted a Nazi party dinner. What do you think would happen about that, folks?
24/7.
It'll be 24. We'd never hear the end of it. But the communists can go to these meetings all the time and nobody says anything. The communist movement, there's one movement worse than the Nazi movement in the last century. Only one, and that was the communist movement. The Nazis killed millions of people, but the communists outbeat them by a factor of 5 or 6. But they're okay. They're nice people now. Because the victors write the history, you see. And the communists are now considered sort of socially acceptable, where the Nazis are quite rightly despised. Well, they should be equally despised, people. And any politician who's involved with the communist movement in this country should be kicked out of Congress, state rep, county commission, any level of government. There is no place for totalitarians in this system. So Richard Blumenthal has been involved with the communist movement in this state for at least 10 years, probably more like 15. No question. He knew exactly what he was doing and where he was speaking. No question. But he lied of this state, and not many people put him to account. The Republicans should have been on him like white on rice. Because the record is out there, folks. The record is out there. Chris Murphy. Well, you know, he was right in there. He was really on Trump's case, because Trump was involved with Russia. Trump was involved with Russia, and that's just disgusting. We can't have candidates in this country involved with foreign powers. He was one of the main on and on and on. Trump, Russia, Trump, Russia, Trump, Russia. You couldn't shut him up on the subject. While he was doing that, he had a Communist Party member, Maxwell Goldman, on his staff. An actual Communist Party member was working on his staff for at least 3 years while he was doing that stuff. He has been involved in right back to the Connecticut, supposed to the war back in 2006, 2007. He was going to their meetings. He has been heavily involved. You see him, I've got pictures of him with Scott Marks, Reverend Scott Marks of the Communist Party, Joel Fishman of the Communist Party, Winheimer of the Communist Party. He's got many photographs of them standing there with Communist Party members on a regular basis. He is completely in bed with the Communist Party in this state. And who calls him out on it? No one. You know, he's on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, people. That's a very, very sensitive position. And he has a Communist Party member on his staff while he's doing that. The Communist Party that is loyal to the Communist Party of China and the Communist Party of Russia. And that's not a problem. District 1, John B. Larson, active in Connecticutans opposed to war, very active for several years with the Connecticut Alliance for Retired Americans, regularly attends their events. That is completely run by Communist Party members, as everybody on the left in this state knows, but that's no problem for John Larson. District 2, now we've got a couple of people running against Joe Courtney, right? Yep. Now he's been involved in Connecticut's opposed to war, very, very active with the Connecticut Alliance for Retired Americans. I've got a photo of him at one of their meetings with Joelle Fishman, the daughter-in-law of a Soviet spy, with Edie Fishman, her mother, with Winheimer at this meeting. I've got a picture of him with Winheimer, calling Winheimer his friend. Winheimer of the Communist Party. Now, Connecticut is a submarine state, right? It's a big naval state. Now, the Communist Party of China is building a big navy right now and a big submarine fleet to basically oppose you guys in the Pacific. It's a big arms race going on in the Pacific. Joe Courtney serves on the Armed Services Committee overseeing submarine technology. But that's all right. It doesn't matter. He's hanging around with pro-Chinese communists. That's fine. This guy is completely in bed with the Communist Party, which supports China, and he's serving on the Armed Services Committee, on the Submarine Technology Committee, right when the communist friends over the Pacific are working to destroy your fleet. But there's no security problem there, right? That should be a for security clearance to work in a submarine base in this state, to work in the base, and they knew about his Communist Party connections. Do you think he'd get a clearance? No. Well, he might now, but he wouldn't have in normal times. But he can serve on the committee in Congress, no problem. But you think there'd be security checks in Congress, right? There are none. There is zero. None at all. In my movie over there, Enemies Within, I talk about the 100 members of your US Congress who couldn't pass a background check to drive a school bus in this county. Same in the US Senate. It's that deeply penetrated, folks, because there's no background checks, none at all. Not one. You think the Iranians may know about this? You think the Chinese may know about this? The Venezuelans, the Cubans? District 3, Rosa DeLauro, the preeminent Communist Party supporter in this state. She has been Joel Fishman's best friend for 15 years. She regularly attends meetings in Howe Street, 37 Howe Street. She went to Cuba in 2011, where they met with pro-communist Cuban journalists, including one American member of the Bomb, and now works for Radio Havana. I've got photographs of the meeting. She has been involved in the Communist Party in the state going back at least 15 years. No problems at all. She is number 3 in the Democratic caucus. And this is her job. Her job is to nominate Democratic Congress members for committees. So she gets to decide who goes on the Armed Services Committee, who goes on the Financial Services Committee. She gets to decide who goes on the Education Committee. She gets to decide this, folks, and she is best friends with a pro-Chinese communist who is the daughter-in-law of a Soviet spy.
She actively seeks their endorsement every year.
Oh, she actively does. She doesn't make a secret of her involvement. I've got pictures of her hugging Joel Fishman. And Joel Fishman happens to be the head of the Communist Party USA's Political Action Committee, which is the committee that liaises between the Communist Party and the Democrat Party. So basically, her and Joel Fishman can basically decide who goes on which committee in your Congress, who gets the nicest spots. So they can put communists anywhere they want. That's why, as I said, every major committee in your Congress is run by a radical or a communist. Benny Thompson, head of Homeland Security. Homeland Security, people. He went to Cuba in 2000 and held meetings with Fidel Castro to have a scholarship set up in Cuba to bring a young American communist to get free medical training in Cuba. Many of them, the sons and daughters of top Communist Party members. And now they're spread out all over the country, basically trained Cuban agents. And Benny Thompson's head of Homeland Security, and all he's worried about is the 7 white supremacists in this country. Rosa DeLauro is right up there. She's one of the top Democrats and is completely and openly in bed with the Communist Party in this state. Jim Himes, okay, he's a very rich area he represents. People think he's a big Wall Street man, and he is, because Wall Street is very much in bed with China now. So there's no real conflict there. But he was elected with the help of the Communist Party. They said he would be a people's champion. That's how the Communist Party described him. And he did his thesis, I think it was at Harvard, on the Nicaraguan Sandinistas' self-defense units. These were the local spy units for the Nicaraguan Sandinistas, who would set up a little unit in every neighborhood so they could spy on anybody, the dissidents, or anybody who didn't quite toe the line. So he did a thesis on these people. Basically the auxiliary of the Nicaraguan KGB, and he thought they were fine people. He thought they were great, just great. That's Jim Himes, regarded as one of the more moderate Democrats in this state. And Johanna Hayes, the latest one, well, she wants to partner with the committee of the CARA, the Council for American, the Senior Cities, the Council on American, Council for Retired Americans. She wants to partner with them. This is a communist organization. One of the key staffers in her office was a man called Len Yianali. He propagandized for her. He worked in her office to get her elected. He wrote letters praising her to your local newspapers. Long-time Communist Party member. She is very heavily in bed with Democratic Socialists of America. They worked on her campaign. You see photographs of them together on a regular basis. You know, very photogenic, very charming young woman, former teacher of the year, all this kind of thing. I believe she serves on the Education Committee. And speaking of education, one of your key state reps in this state is Edwin Vargas Jr. Okay? Edward Vargas Jr. serves on the Education Committee, I believe, in your state. He's a teacher from Hartford. But he used to be a member of the Puerto Rican Socialist Party. This was a militant, pro-Cuban communist organization. Now, he worked to basically lift a Meridian elementary school principal, a man called Miguel Cardona, to become your state education commissioner. That was done by your governor and Edwin Vargas. They put that man as your education commissioner. Now he's Secretary of Education for the whole country, folks. And he works with a very deep Maoist called Miguel Noguera, who used to be part of the League of Revolutionary Struggle, a pro-Chinese communist group. So you're putting people on the national stage here, folks. You put Rosa DeLauro on the national stage to basically fill the Democratic Party full of communists. You put Joe Courtney on the Armed Services Committee, overseeing your submarines, and you put Miguel Cardona into as the position of Secretary of Education. So this is coming out of Connecticut. This is right in your state that you're putting these people on the national stage. So they're not just corrupting your state, they're not just bringing you down, they're bringing the nation down, folks, because they have such a base here that once these people get in, you can't darn well get rid of them, and they can do whatever they want. So we're in a situation right now, folks. We're in a revolution in this country, and Connecticut is one of the bases of this revolution. And the Republican Party in this state should be raising merry hell about this. They should be every single day calling these people out. You know, if the Democrats endlessly go on about the imaginary white supremacists in this country, and we let them, and we kowtow to them, they are completely in bed with pro-Chinese communists. You know, the communists who just locked down Shanghai, murdering how many millions of people, murdering how many thousands of people, who just deliberately, in my opinion, infected this country with their COVID, who just deliberately burned our cities with their Black Lives Matter, which is their operation, and had a big hand in the outcome of the last election, and are killing 80,000 kids every year with their fentanyl, and are stealing our technology, and are corrupting our politicians. You know, Ratcliffe, Trump's intelligence advisor, said a couple of years ago that the Chinese had co-opted so many American politicians, they can now determine which legislation passes the Congress and which doesn't. We got all this happening. They're destroying our country, but our Republican Party won't call them out on it. Won't even mention this stuff. We are in a revolution, folks. We've got very limited time to turn this around, and our Republican leaders won't even touch the issue. Trump was the first one who put the word communist back on Americans' lips. Now, a lot of people are talking about it. Some Republicans are, and I'll give them full credit for that. But not our leadership, folks. Could it be because Mitch McConnell has made lots and lots and lots of money trading with the Chinese? Could it be that a lot of our Republicans have very cozy business relationships with Chinese or with Wall Street, which has made a lot of money trading with China? See, the old Soviet Union, they had to rely on ideology mainly. They had to recruit young communists who would then infiltrate the Democratic Party or the churches or the labour unions and work for the Soviet Union. And that's hard work, especially as communism got more and more discredited. Well, the Chinese still rely on ideology. They've still got their Communist Party. They've still got their Liberation Road. They've still got these other organisations. But they also have lots and lots of money. So they can get moderate Democrats with that money. They can get some Republicans with that money. It was considered perfectly acceptable for senior Republicans to have big business interests in China. To me, that is the moral equivalent of having business interests in Nazi Germany in 1938. That is a moral equivalent. Any legislator with business interests with Chinese companies or investments in China or direct ties with China should be automatically investigated, and I believe should be primaried out and thrown out of the GOP, because they are leading us to hell in a handbasket, folks, when they should be preserving our Constitution. They should be standing with us and should be trying to defeat these communists. No, they are in bed with them on many occasions. So what we've got in this country right now is we've got a communist Democratic Party and a compromised Republican Party. What we have is what is on our side is the grassroots of the GOP and actually some of the grassroots of the Democrats. We got 80 million Trump voters out there, folks, and 30 million more who wish they had been. And we got God. So why the heck? So if you look at the GOP, so I'll take some questions later, but I just want to say the GOP in the state and other states. Now, the GOP hates being involved in social issues. They only really want to talk about fiscal issues. Lower taxes, lower regulations, and all of that's good. And you can see that, there's a lot of people in the state who want to see that happening. But do you think the young black mother in New Haven, whose neighbourhood is infested by gangs, who has no police presence, whose church is woke, whose kids can't get a job, do you really think she cares about the budget, or does she care about social issues? She cares about the cops on the street. She wants the gangs out of the area. She wants the drugs out of the area. She wants her kids to go to a great school and get a job, not competing with illegal immigrants who work for way less. She wants a path out of poverty for her family. And those are the social issues. She doesn't want deviants propagandizing her kids in your schools. She doesn't want her kids to come home not understanding which gender they are that day. She doesn't want any of that stuff. She cares about her church. She cares about her faith. She cares about her borders. She cares about the social issues. So why are we not campaigning almost exclusively on the social issues? Is that not what Trump did, folks?
Yeah.
He talked about the borders. He talked about the schools. He talked about the things, patriotism. He talked about gun rights. He talked about all the things that real Americans care about. That is the biggest quadrant of votes out there, folks. He got a lot of Bernie Sanders people because they didn't agree with him on fiscal issues, but they did care about the social issues. A lot of liberal moms are disgusted with the state of education. They want their kids to get a good education. They might be pro-abortion, they might be really, really liberal, but they want their kids in a darn good school. You know, Ron DeSantis won Florida because he got 30,000 black charter school moms to cross over from Democrat to vote Republican. That was about the margin of victory because he campaigned on social issues. Trump campaigned on social issues. What gets people marching on your state capitol? Abortion or a 0.5% reduction in the sales tax? What do people care about? Those young guys that work in Walmart. Do they care about a balanced budget in the state, or do they care about their gun rights? You know, what do the minority communities care about? They want a balanced budget, or they want cops in their communities. They want good schools. They don't want deviants in their schools. What do they care about, folks? Socialism. They care about all the social issues. That is what motivates them. And we have a Republican Party right now who wants to basically ignore all of that and just say nothing and let the Democrats implode. Right. That's their strategy. That's their explicit strategy. We've got the greatest opportunity we've ever had to bring millions of new people into our camp by talking about the issues they actually care about, and our leadership doesn't want to talk about that stuff. Well, to hell with them, folks. You want to win elections. You want to win elections in this state, people. Don't focus on what the GOP wants you to focus on. Talk about the issues the community cares about. Tell them what you're going to do for their schools. Tell them how you're going to give them rights to get rid of their scoreboards and get rid of their curriculums and put a Hillsdale College curriculum into their school. Tell them about how much you're going to get extra police on the beat. Tell them how you're going to stand up to the teachers' unions, the biggest child molesters in the country, and put them in their damn place. You might not get so much money from the RNC, but you'll get thousands more votes, people, and what actually wins elections. You cannot win Connecticut by being Democrat light. There's two polls, and years ago you would say, yeah, there wasn't much difference between Republicans and Democrats, and the swing voters were the big deal. That's old history, folks. The Democrats have gone way, way left. The Republican base has gone way, way right, and the Republican Party's gone a little bit right. The Republican Party talking about social issues and flying the flag and being proud of what they are and proud of the Constitution and proud of the military and proud of the heritage in this country could be a 70-30 party. That's the only way you're going to win, people. If you got Democrat communist and Democrat light and you're a young person, you're going to vote for the people who believe in what they actually say, or you're going to believe in the people who sort of put their finger up and see which way the wind's blowing. Young people want people to tell the truth. That's why young people love Bernie Sanders, but they also love Ron Paul. You know? Because these are people who actually stood on what they believed in. And, you know, people actually admire conviction often more than they do policy. Donald Trump got millions of left-wing voters, millions of Latino and black voters, because he talked about the issues they actually cared about and had concrete plans for doing it and stood up and fought. This is a winning formula, people. Ronald Reagan did a lot of that too. And the young people loved him like a chocolate too, did they not? You know, they say, oh, you got to run real hip, cool candidates, and like Marco Rubio, and the young people will love you. No, they don't like Marco Rubio. They like Ron Paul, who was a grumpy old bugger, you know. But he stood on his principles. They like Trump, this big businessman from New York, who young people aren't supposed to like. They loved him. Young black kids thought he's the man, you know, because he's standing up. He's badass, you know. I'm going to back this guy because he actually believes in this country and he's honest and he'll tell you the truth. You know, how can you think any other way is the way out of this? Here's another little thing that's looming on the horizon in the state. And I've got to be proud to say that Connecticut's one of the few states in the union that has closed primaries. And what does that mean? Only Republicans can vote in Republican primaries. Only Democrats can vote in Democrat primaries. And you have rhinos in the state want to change that. So we're like everybody else. This is how it works. Anybody love Liz Cheney here? Any big Liz Cheney fans in this room? Right? Well, the Wyoming Republican Party doesn't like her either. The grassroots hates her. But she's probably going to win re-election in Wyoming, because they have open primaries in Wyoming and Democrats can vote in your primary. So all the Democrats in Wyoming are going to go and vote for Liz Cheney. Lauren Boebert, she's pretty good, right, out in Colorado? Well, she may lose because they have open primaries in Colorado and every Democrat in her district is going to back the Republican rhino opponent to her. Opening primaries is how the rhinos and the Democrats collude to keep conservatives out. Don't let them do it in this state, people. Things may be tough here, but they're going to get way tougher if you open your primaries. Way, way tougher. They say, oh, it's going to bring more people into the process, right? Absolute garbage. Absolute garbage. If you're a Baptist, you let the Methodists vote for your pastor? You know, if you're in the Lions Club, do you let Kiwanis people choose your executive? The Republican Party is a private organisation. Only Republicans should choose Republican representatives. You've got to make sure you keep that. Okay, so I know I'm getting the word to wind up. So look, this is where we're at. We're in a revolutionary situation, but I go all over this country, folks. I have never seen such a ferment, such a grassroots ferment. Moms for Liberty, all these grassroots groups. It was Moms for Liberty that won the election in Virginia, folks. Yes. Glenn Young could run a great campaign, so did Winsome Sears, but it was Moms for Liberty that delivered that victory. It wasn't the GOP. So there are social issues, you see. Social issues won that election. Education, ending critical race theory in schools. That's what fired the people up, because for a whole year, for 2 years, you've had millions of people sitting at home for a year, reading their kids' school textbooks, horrified, sitting in on their Zoom sessions, watching their cities burned by pro-Chinese communists with no punishment, watching their economy devastated by the communist Chinese virus, and watching an election stolen in the richest, freest country the world has ever seen. And they're finally waking up to the fact that, yes, we could lose this country. And millions of people are now active like they've never been. This is the year to basically take over the GOP, get rid of a lot of rhinos, get a whole bunch more real conservatives. This is the year it's going to happen, people. And this may be our last chance. But the tide is for the Constitution. The tide is for America first. The tide is against the Democrats and all the mandates and all this kind of thing. Are we going to be on the tide for freedom, or are we going to try and stop that tide and sit in the middle and just win by being moderates? What are we going to do, folks? There's no way we're going to win if we don't join that tide, if we don't lead that tide. The people are just appalled by what they've seen. You know, your young Democrat family in New Haven, they're paying $4 or $5 a gas too, people. They're looking at their schools and are not happy. But they don't have Republicans coming in and say, this is how we're going to stop this. This is how we're going to change this for you so you can have part of the American dream as well. If we do that, we can have a wave in this country like you've never seen. And to do that, we've got to basically ignore the instructions coming from the RNC and campaign on the issues that people actually care about. Yeah. We might not win them all, folks, but if we try and go up the middle, we're going to lose a lot that we should have won. And every single seat, you could get 2 seats out of Connecticut for the Congress this year, if you really do it right. 2 seats. We're only 5 short. Wouldn't it be great to bring 40% out of that, 40% of that total out of Connecticut? And it can be done. If you run hardcore campaigns, you're out there, you're in the Democrats' face, you're calling them out, and you're laying out your agenda so nobody has any doubts about where you stand. If people do that, we can win here. We can win seats in the state legislature. You can start the road back for this state. Isn't that a little bit overdue? Has the moderate Republican model done you a lot of good in the last few years?
No, it has not.
None at all. Every election we've been losing ground.
We always fall short of our short.
We fall short. Well, you know, how about doing something different? How about doing what Trump did and what Reagan did? How about doing what Marjorie Taylor Greene does and Lauren Boebert and people like that? How about trying that? Tell the people the truth and stand on your principles. That's a novel approach in politics, but when it's been done, it has actually worked. So I'll just say here, you know, I don't know how this is all going to turn out, but I know this. If we do nothing, we're going to sell our children into slavery. Simple as that. But if all of us sweat blood for what we believe in, if we stand for our God, our country, our Constitution, our children, unapologetically and proudly, 2 things may happen. One, we may sweat blood for what we believe, and maybe we fail. Maybe. But at least all of us will earn the right to look our children in the eye and say, I did everything I possibly could for you. And what's that worth, folks? And if we win, and we absolutely can win this, folks, including right here, if we win, we will spark an economic boom like we have never seen across this country. We will spark liberty revolutions all over the world. We will set the stage for a much needed spiritual revival in this country and across the world. And all of us will earn the right to pass on to our children not just the amazing country that you inherited and some of you like me came to seeking refuge. We will earn the right to pass on to our children not just the amazing country that was here when we started, but one that is even greater, one that could lead the world for hundreds of years into the future. Is just the chance of that, is just the opportunity for that worth a little sacrifice, people? Yes. So I want to say to you, thank you to all of you patriots here for your untiring work over so many years. Now is the time to double down, folks, because this is the most important time in our political lives. I want to thank you for what you do for America, for my country, and for liberty. God bless America and God bless the Constitution state. May it live up to its name and may it lead this country out of slavery. Thank you so much. Yeah. They're basically becoming more like Democrats. And you have a lot of Democrats who actually run as Republicans too in certain areas. So there's a few things why we can't get enough conservatives. One is election integrity has been a big problem. And so a lot of good candidates don't want to stand because they don't want to waste the money when the election's going to be stolen anyway. See, Ron DeSantis has actually set up an organisation in our state. I just can't remember the name right now, but it's to deal with only election integrity issues. So you can complain to this body if you suspect there's been vote fraud in a local county commission race or a national race, and they will investigate it, and it is a level 3 felony for anybody caught ballot harvesting or any other form of cheating. So that's 5 years in jail if you get caught doing that. This has to be put on the platform of the GOP in this state. Now, a lot of people will object to that. This is not revisiting the last election. We just need to say, look, 10% of our base is probably not going to vote in future elections because they don't trust voting machines or election integrity. We can't afford to lose 10% of our base, folks. So to get them back, we have to give people confidence in the elections. And a body that can prosecute people for vote fraud and put them in the slammer for 5 years would go a long way towards getting our base back and getting conservative candidates. So that should be a remit at your next Republican convention. Let's do what Florida's done. Is Ron DeSantis popular or not? Yeah. Well, let's do what he did. Let's have a parental bill of rights like he did. There are a whole bunch of things. But the other thing is, when you vet your candidates, the typical vetting is, do you support the First Amendment? Of course I do. Great. Do you support the Second Amendment? Of course I do. Great. No, this is what you got to ask. Do you support the First Amendment? Of course. Will you stand up to any university in the state and defund any university in the state who denies free speech to its students? Will you or won't you? Will you stand against the teachers' unions in the state who try and suppress trying to indoctrinate your kids? Will you stand up against the teachers' unions or will you not? Will you stand up to do what Florida's doing, penalising big tech who censor citizens? Will you stand up against big tech and fine them in this state for trampling on the free speech of your citizens, or will you not? You have got to ask them actually what they will do to stand for these amendments that they say they stand for. Gun rights. What part? Are there any aspect of gun rights that can be infringed? Are red flag laws okay? Are excessive ammunition taxes okay? Are town bans on gun laws okay? Will you stand against these things and move bills against these things, or will you not? You've got to actually get them to state their position on what they will do to fix the problems that are there. Just saying, do you support the First Amendment? They'll all say yes. Do you support the Second Amendment? They'll say, yeah, because I love duck hunting. You know, you've got to actually grill your candidates and put them on the spot to say, what will you do to defend the First Amendment? What will you do to defend the Second Amendment and the Fourth Amendment and the 10th Amendment? 10% of most states get less than 10% of their education budget from the feds. 10%. But they take 100% instructions from the Department of Education. Let's say, so will you, as a legislature, vote to stop taking federal money for your education and return education to state level only? Will you or won't you? Will you or not? If they say, well, no, that's really difficult, no, just wipe them off. I'd rather have less candidates standing, but the ones who do stand, you can actually trust, because it's pretty darn heartbreaking putting sweat and money into a candidate who then votes like a Democrat. You know, the Constitution is your guideline. You just go through the Constitution, you see all the areas the Constitution's been trashed, you see what we could do to stand to correct that, and you ask your candidates what they will do, what they will vote for, and who they will stand against, and will they vote to not take federal money if it means violating the Constitution. That's in your hands, folks. If you grill your candidates and put them on the spot like that, you'll soon find who's worth supporting and who isn't. And when you do that, you'll encourage a lot more good people to come forward who might not do so now. Look, the control of the media is a huge problem. And isn't it great that Elon Musk is hoping to take over Twitter? That's going to be a big game changer. So we need to do that to Facebook as well. But yes, at the local level, we have our local notice boards. We have that kind of thing. But actually, real media in the state would be a great advantage. See, this is what we need to do to the Hartford Courant too. We need to draw up a list of all their advertisers. And we need to go to all those advertisers as citizens' action groups and say, if you continue advertising with this paper, we are going to boycott you statewide. We're going to get every Conservative in the state to boycott you if you keep advertising with this communist rag. You may not put it in exactly those terms, but that's the point. Look, you've got a lot of economic power in this state. You can boycott the Hartford Courant. You can hit their advertising base. That's what the left does to us. So we got to take down the bad guys, and that'll give space for new good guys to come forward, and they'll get some of that advertising that used to go to the Courant. So it's a two-pronged strategy. I don't know what's specifically happening in the state, but I know what you're saying is happening in Georgia and several other places. But it's got to be two-pronged. We've got to be bringing our media forward, but we've got to be defunding the communists as well. See, look, when I did my little 20-minute video on the communists in your state, they got over 1,000 shares. So that was 1,000 times it was posted on Facebook. And that went all over the state. So you can put out a bit of truth, and you can get it all over the state really, really quickly. You know, we have the opportunity there, so absolutely applaud what you're doing. We've got the grassroots. The grassroots is activated. Our big problem is we've got a lot of our leadership are holdovers from a previous time. We're in the stage where we've got to use the elections we can to get as many of our people into power as possible, and as many of the old guard out of power as possible. You know, look, right now the RNC, on the RNC, it's 70% Tea Party folk or Trump people. That's the highest it's ever been. The same is happening in the grassroots and the GOP all over the country. The old guard is on the run, and the fired up patriots, the much younger patriots, are really making ground. Yes, it's uneven, but I'll tell you what, this trend is already starting. In 2 or 3 election cycles, we will be the dominant faction. The old Chamber of Commerce way of doing things is no longer cutting it. The country is moving much more populist, much more America first. They're actually seeing the state of the country and are appalled by it. We have to address that. And we have to be the Republican Party has to be the grassroots Republican Party that is the party of working people, that is seen as the party of working people, that cares about their education, cares about their patriotism, cares about their borders, all of those, cares about their faith, cares about their guns. You know, we don't want to be seen as the party of Wall Street. Young people do not like Wall Street. You know, we got to be seen as the grassroots party, not just being seen as it, being the grassroots party. So these are the kind of candidates we lead, because the Jeb Bush model of republicanism is dead now. It ain't going to ever win another election in this country. Yeah, Keywiki is Keywiki. It's a pun on Kiwi, which is a slang term for New Zealand, right? But keywiki.org. Yeah, .org. It is 140,000 files of leftists, communists, terrorists, state reps, county commissioners, and there's, you know, several hundred files from Connecticut here. So most of the Connecticut Communist Party members, I've got, you know, pages on the Quiet Corner DSA, the Central Connecticut DSA, the You know, all the Democratic Socialist America chapters here. I got files on many of all your congressmen, all your senators, your governors, many of your state reps, many of your county commissioners. So you can go there and start to find a little bit of a background on these people. And you'll be horrified at what you find in some of these people. You know, big files there on Blumenthal and Murphy, and I have lots of photographs in there, so everything I say is based on what you can see with your own eyes. So please go to keywiki.org. I noticed I was going to do some little bit of research this morning, a little bit of top-up research, and my computer, my laptop wouldn't connect last night in my hotel. So I think, oh, well, I'll look at my website. I open up my website. My website's down this morning, my TrevorLoudon.com. So I looked on the computer in the hotel, and I typed in KeyWiki. KeyWiki is not available right now. So it will come up on my phone, so it's not down. But I'm saying the hotel will not bring up keywiki.org. So I'm just, you know, I'm not saying there's any nefarious stuff there. I just thought it was a little bit strange. Oh yeah, Epoch Times. Anybody seen Epoch Times? Okay. It's the best conservative paper in the country right now, I believe. And I have a show on there called Counterpunch. And it's got a picture of me with boxing gloves on. And if you're a subscriber to Epoch Times, you can see all my shows. That's where I put the little video I did on Connecticut. But I've also got them on Florida. I've got about 30 videos there, plus about 50 articles. So you can go there as well. And I'm going to be doing more on Connecticut, you know, but probably at least another 2 on Connecticut this year, because I think it's so important, this state, and the Communist Party presence here is more obvious than it is in a lot of other states. And I think, you know, the people here are just sick of it. They just need to have it identified, and they need to have a clear way out of this. And if you can do that, I think you can pick up seats in this state. Well, that's keywiki.org, but there's trevorloudon.com, which is my basic daily blog. So trevorloudon.com, but Google has forgotten my IP address, so you have to put it in the search bar at the top of the page, okay? And then it will bring it up. KeyWiki got attacked. KeyWiki got hacked about 2 months ago, and they did a lot of damage to the site. And our computer technician found that the IP address doing the hacking was from Beijing, China, within a couple of 100 yards of a major Chinese spy school working in that state. So, but that could be coincidence. It could be some spotty 15-year-old in his mom's basement. Who knows? But yeah, there's a lot of people out there who don't want this. And one of the pages they took down was Jim Himes, actually. And I think they took down Rosa DeLauro too, but I put them back up. I've got to put up Jim Himes tonight because I didn't realise it was down. Dinesh D'Souza, and you should see this 2,000 Mules. It's a very good movie. And what he did, they did cell phone tracking and identified thousands of people who had been going to these organised non-profit organisations in 7 key states, and then they would turn up at ballot boxes late at the evening. So the implication was stuffing huge numbers of ballots, and they said that stole the election. Well, I did it last year. See, the communists who gave you Black Lives Matter are a group called Liberation Road, pro-Chinese communists. And they run out of this Chinese consulate in San Francisco. Well, last year, these same communists set up a group 2 years ago called Seed the Vote. SEED, Seed the Vote. And they had voter registration organisations in the black and Latino communities of 7 key swing states. They had black leaders organising communities in Wisconsin. They had Lucha in Arizona, Detroit Action in Michigan. They had Pennsylvania Stands Up in Pennsylvania, New Georgia Project in Georgia, Florida Rising in Florida. Are these states familiar to you people? They claim of the 7 states they targeted, they won 6 for Biden-Harris. I think there was a big overlap between these Chinese voter registration organisations and what Dinesh D'Souza has uncovered. He didn't name the organisations, but I am betting there's a big overlap with these Chinese organisations. Now, I'll give you one more little thing on this. Well, so what they did, they didn't win those states for Biden-Harris. They lifted black and Latino cities so that the pre-planned vote fraud would have been hopefully less noticeable. That's what I think they did. But the model for this network was Virginia. Remember when Virginia was deep, deep red? Yeah. And then it went really blue, and thanks to Glenn Youngkin and Moms for Liberty, now it's clawed a lot of that, some of that back, at least for now. But this is how they flipped, this is how the communists flipped Virginia. And they're doing this here too. In 2005, the Liberation Road Communists set up a group in Virginia called New Virginia Majority. And it's like Acorn. They wore orange t-shirts, right? And they go and sign up thousands of minority voters in Northern Virginia. And so they'd go into households and sign people up and get them to the polls. They claimed they won 300,000 new minority voters for the Democratic Party. They also worked with McAuliffe, the governor of Virginia, to give pardons to 200,000 Virginia felons so they could get their voting rights back. So they wrote in 2018, when they'd finally taken the state blue, they wrote an op-ed in the New York Times saying, "We did this. New Virginia Majority did this." They didn't talk about the Chinese connection, but they admitted they took the state. Now, the reason they were so successful, they were using GIS computerized maps. They had every precinct in Virginia mapped out. They could tell you where the Laotians lived. They could tell you where the Puerto Ricans lived. They could tell you where the Iranians lived. So they sent the right volunteers into the right areas to sign up the right people, right? And those maps were generated for 10 years on contract, and still are being, by a Liberation Road communist called Steve McClure, who is a graduate of the Geography Department of George Mason University Geography Department. Well, he's been making those maps and still is on contract working out of the Geography Department of Wuhan University, China. Wow. So they flipped Virginia out of China. This same network is why North Carolina has a Democrat governor, why Kentucky has a Democrat governor, why Georgia has 2 Democrat senators, why Arizona has 2 Democrat senators, and why that certified imbecile Beto O'Rourke came that close to beating Ted Cruz in 2018 for the US Senate race. They work in the South, they work in the minority communities. These are Chinese-backed networks working in your elections right under your very noses. And you've got a pro-Chinese Communist Party in this state doing exactly the same thing, and no doubt committing huge vote fraud while they're doing it. And just by the way, the other Communist Party in this state, Democratic Socialists of America, is part of the Sao Paulo Forum, which was what the President of Mexico is part of, which was set up by Fidel Castro to bring back to Latin America what had been lost in Eastern Europe for communism. So these Democratic Socialists of America people are working with a Latin American communist organization directed by Cuba. So these are in your state right now, folks. And that's not even talking the Islamic stuff. But, you know, they're all working together. Well, what you've got to do is come up with a plan of social conservative issues that you can try and get as many of your candidates talking about as you can, independently of the GOP. What are the issues in your communities, especially in the minority communities? You know, do they care about cops? Do they care about what's happening in their schools? Do they care about the indoctrination? So you've got to start raising that as an issue. You've got to put it on your Republican Party program that we're going to have voter registration penalties, and we're going to have vote fraud penalties in the state and a body to do it. But you've got the base, and obviously make sure you never get closed primaries in the state. But the key thing is to get a cadre of 5 or 6 real conservatives in your state legislature, in your Senate, form a Freedom Caucus in both of those legislators, and get that Freedom Caucus to then start recruiting more people for the next legislative cycle. It might only be 3 people. If you can get 3 people in your Senate, 4 people in your House, start a Freedom Caucus. And
We already
oh, you have? Okay, well, sorry, I didn't know.
Conservative caucus that has almost 15 members now, right?
Okay. Okay, well, these people should be leading the endorsements of other candidates. You should be making sure that every candidate you address has the endorsement of the Conservative caucus. If they cannot get the endorsement of the Conservative caucus,
What about the idea of a friends up for the Freedom Caucus?
yeah, well, let's, a wide, yeah, absolutely, you know. Well, I'm glad you already have that, but you've got to get it out. It's got to be endorsing. It's got to be something every one of your candidates goes to, and that you make their endorsement a condition of backing your state reps. And go to your state reps and say, we want you endorsed by the Freedom Caucus. If you're not going to get any of our support, and we've got 300 volunteers in your area. Do you want them or do you not? Yeah, well, that's right. You know, the JBS puts out a good constitutional guide. The only thing I'd say about it is, I think it needs much more focus on the social issues, where not just how you vote, because a lot of these things don't even come up for votes. Where does this candidate stand on abortion? Where does this candidate stand on gun rights? So it's got to be expanded beyond the votes, because many of these issues are never voted on. You know, if you could go to a Hispanic church and say, this representative is 100% against abortion. They go, right, this representative is going to get every bit of sex education out of your schools, is going to go back to a reading, writing and arithmetic program and put English as the first language every kid learns in school. If you actually put those positions, you go to a Hispanic church and you say that, you'll get a lot of votes. You go to a black community organisation and say that kind of thing, you'll get a lot of votes. Just the voting guide alone is great, but that's not enough because it doesn't address some of those issues.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, well, I just want to say thank you so much. Come and see me over here. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor.
I just want, sorry, real quick.
Yeah,
I've got to say, I've got a few of my books left, not too many, but I got Enemies Within, which is all about the Marxists in Congress, a little bit about Joe Courtney and people. That's the Marxists and Islamists in Congress. But I particularly want people to see our new movie, Enemies Within the Church. It's about the Marxists in the churches. And if you're wondering why your churches don't stand up, this is why.
Yeah.
This is why.
Exactly.
Thank you. Thank you.
Trevor, thank you very much.
Most welcome. Thank you.